works a lot better than mine for Second Life. So
Okay.
keeping my fingers crossed.
So, if we can have Vidav as Harold Shea, and if we can have Lois as Reed Chalmers, and Atlantica as Gertrude, and Laura Lila as narrator, and and if I can have Vadir as the waitress. I play Walter Baynard, and I believe that should be the cast. The makeshift PDF was taken from the hardback version, and it's 90 pages, not 91 pages actually, and which tonight's 6 pages works out to about 15 weeks if all goes well. The Roaring Trumpet went 13 weeks, so it gives you an idea. And basically, yes.
Mara, where are you ending on page 100?
There's a division right about 2/3 of the way down.
Okay, so that's where you're going to stop before that?
Yeah, where it says next weekend.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is the beginning of the second episode or story, and I believe, is everyone ready, and does everyone have sound?
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Vadir?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Good. Okay. Take it away, Laura Lila. Actually, I guess it's Shay.
Harold Shea starts.
Yes.
Steak.
Porterhouse?
House?
Sirloin?
Both, so long as they're big and rare.
Harold, whatever this is all about, please be careful of your diet. A large protein intake for a man who doesn't do physical labor.
Physical labor? The last meal I had was 24 hours ago, and it was a little dish of oatmeal mush. Sour, too. Since then, I have fought a duel with a couple of giants, done acrobatics on a magic broomstick. I had a ride on the god's enchanted brewery horse. Well, anyway, I've been roasted and frozen and shaken and nearly scared to death, and by Thor's hammer, I want food.
Harold, are you feeling well?
Fine, Toots. Or I will be when I surround some grub. Steak!
Listen, Harold, don't. You pop out of nowhere in that crazy costume. You talk wildly about things you couldn't expect anyone to believe.
You don't have to believe I popped out of nowhere either.
Then can't you tell me what's wrong?
Nothing's wrong, and I'm not going to talk about it until I've consulted Dr. Chalmers.
Wow, if that's your attitude, come on, Walter, let's go to a movie.
But I want to listen.
Oh, be a gentleman for once in your life.
Oh, all right, Gert.
He leered back at Shea as he went.
Anyway, you did bring back any dream girls.
Shea grinned after them.
There goes the guy who used to kid me about how Gert had gotten the psychological jump on me. I hope she rides herd on him.
Chalmers smiled faintly.
You forget Walter's infallible defense mechanism.
What's that?
When the pressure becomes too great, he can simply go to sleep on her.
Shay gave a suppressed snort.
You know not what... Oh, food!
He had attacked his plate, working his mouth around a piece of steak big enough to choke a horse, with effort, like a snake engulfing a toad. An expression of pure bliss spread over his face as he chewed. Chalmers noted that his colleague ignored the fact that half the restaurant was staring at the tableau of a long-faced young man in baggy Norse woolens.
A somewhat less rapid rate of ingestion.
Shay shook a finger, gulped down his mouthful, and spoke.
Don't worry about me.
Between mouthfuls, he told his story. Reed Chalmers' mild eyes bugged as he watched and listened to his young friend.
Good gracious. That's the third of those steaks. Somewhat inadequately called small. You'll render yourself ill.
This is the last one. Hey, waitress, may I please have an apple pie? Not just a segment, I want the whole pie. So the spook said... So the spook said, go on back to where you came from. And here I am.
While I have known you, Harold, to commit venial sins of rhetorical exaggeration incompatible with true scientific accuracy, I have never known you to engage in deliberate fabrication. So I believe you. The general alteration in your appearance and bearing furnishes persuasive corroboration.
I changed?
You show the effects of physical hardship, as well as exposure to the sun and wind.
That all?
You would like me to say, would you not, that your air of self-conscious brashness has been replaced by one of legitimate self-confidence?
Well, yeah.
Those conscious of shortcomings are always eager to be informed of radical improvement. Actually, such improvements, when they occur at all in an adult, take place slowly. No miraculous change is to be expected in a couple of weeks.
He twinkled at Shay's discomfort and added,
I will admit that you seem to show some alteration of personality, and I think in the right direction.
At least I learned to appreciate the value of theory. If you'd been along, we'd have really gotten somewhere in applying the screwy laws of the world of Scandinavian myth. What?
Nothing.
Of course, you'd never have stood the physical end of it.
I suppose not.
It checked your theory of paraphysics, all right. In that universe, the laws of similarity and contagion held good. At least the magic spells I figured out with their help worked.
Chalmers brushed his gray mop out of his eyes.
Amazing. I asserted that the transfer of the physical body to another space-time frame by symbolic logic, what did you call it? Syllogismobile, was possible. But it is a shock to have so far-fetched a deduction confirmed experimental proof.
Sure, we've got something all right. But what are we going to do with it?
It is rather presents a whole new world picture, unlike anything but some of the Oriental religions. Infinity of universes, moving along parallel but distinct space-time vectors. But, as you put it, what can be done with it? If I publish the results of your experiment, you'll simply say, poor old Chalmers has a tile loose, and in any case, an psychologist has no business venturing into physics. Think of Oliver Lodge. The only satisfactory proof would be to send some of the doubters to another universe. Unfortunately, we could hardly count on their encountering Grua with a handful of enchanted snow. They would be unable to return, and the doubters left behind would be doubters still. You perceive the difficulty.
I wonder how the fight came out. It might be worthwhile going back to see.
It would be inadvisable. The Ragnarok was only beginning when you left. You might return to find the giants had won and were in charge. If you would venture, there are plenty of other and less,
Other what?
well, perhaps nothing of importance. I was about to say systematic, attainable universes. Since you left, I have been engaged in the development of the structural theory of a multiple universe cosmology, and
Listen, Dr. Chalmers, we both know too much psychology to kid each other. Something's eating you besides paraphysical mathematics.
Harold, I've always maintained that you'd make a better salesman or politician than psychologist. You're weak on theory, but in offhand rule-of-thumb diagnosis of behavior patterns, you are incomparable.
Don't evade, Doctor.
Very well. Were you perhaps thinking of making another journey soon?
Why, I just got back and haven't had time to think. Say, you aren't suggesting you'd like to go along, are you?
Reed Chalmers rolled a fragment of bread into a precise gray pill.
As a matter of fact, that's what I was suggesting, Harold. Here I am, 56 years old, without family or intimate friends, except you young men of the Garden Institute. I have made, or believe I have, the greatest cosmological discovery since Copernicus, yet its nature is such that it cannot be proved, and no one will credit it without the most exhaustive proof. My work is done, but to a result that will afford me no appreciation in this world. May I not be permitted the foible of seeking a fuller life elsewhere?
Back in Shay's room, and seated in the best armchair, Chalmers stretched his legs and meditatively sipped a highball.
I'm afraid your suggestion of Cuchulain's Ireland does not meet with my approval. An adventurous life, no doubt, but culturally a barbarism, with an elaborate system of taboos, violations of which are punished by the removal of heads.
But the girls, those piano-legged Scowigian blondes, they all reminded me of Gertrude.
For a person of my age, amorous adventure has few attractions, and as my partner in this enterprise, I must ask you to remember that while you have certain physical skills that would be useful anywhere, I am limited to fields where intellectual attainments would be of more value than in ancient Ireland. The only non-warriors who got anywhere in those days were minstrels, and I can neither compose lays nor play the harp.
Shay grinned maliciously.
All right, you leave the girls to me then. But I guess you're right. We'll have to drop Queen Maeve and the Ossian.
He peered around the bookshelves.
How about this?
Chalmers examined the volume he handed down.
Spencer's Fairy Queen. Vision unrolled after vision to the sound of varying music, as Dr. Johnson said. Certainly a brilliant and interesting world, and one in which I personally might have some place. But I am afraid we should find it uncomfortable if we landed in the latter half of the story, where Queen Gloriana's knights are having a harder time, as though Spencer were growing discouraged, or the narrative for some reason was escaping from his hands, taking on a life of its own. I am not sure we could exercise the degree of selectivity needed to get into the story at the right point. After all, in your last experience, you attempted Ireland and arrived in Scandinavian myth.
But if you're going adventuring, you can't avoid...
And then he stopped, his mouth open.
You were about to say danger, were you not? I confess.
Doc, listen, why shouldn't we jump right into that last part of the Fairy Queen and help Gloriana's knights straighten things out? You said you'd worked out some new angles. We ought to be better than anyone else in the place. Look what I was able to do in the Ragnarok with the little I know.
You are immodest, Harold.
Chalmers was leaning forward.
Still, it is an attractive plan to look in another world for the achievement denied in this. Suppose you fill my glass again while we consider details.
Well, the first detail I'd like to know something about is what new wrinkles in theory you have in mind.
Chalmers settled himself and took on his lecture room manner.
As I see it, our universes have a relation analogous to that of a pencil of parallel vectors. The vectors themselves represent time, of course. That gives us a six-dimensional cosmos, 3 in space, 1 in time, and 2 which define the relationships of one universe of the cosmos to another. You know enough mathematics to be aware that the fourth dimension, so-called, is only a dimension in the sense of a measurable quality, like color or density. The same applies for the interuniversal dimensions. I maintain...
Whoa! Is there an infinite number of universes?
I wish you would learn to avoid interruptions, Harold. I used to believe so, but now I consider the number finite, though very large. Let me continue. I maintain that what we call magic is merely the physics of some of these other universes. This physics is capable of operating along the interuniversal dimensions.
I see. Just as light can operate through interplanetary space, but sound requires some such conducting medium as air or water.
The analogy is not perfect. Let me continue. You know how the theme of conjuring things up and making them disappear constantly recurs in fairy tales. These phenomena become plausible if we assume the enchanter is snatching things from another universe or banishing them to one.
I see an objection. If the laws of magic don't operate in the conducting medium of our universe, how is it possible to learn about them? I mean, how did they get into fairy stories?
The question is somewhat obvious. You remember my remarking that... I'm sorry, I can't read that word. Is that demence?
Yes.
It's okay. You remember my remarking that dements suffered hallucinations because their personalities were split between this universe and another. The same applies to the composers of fairy stories, though to a lesser degree. Naturally, it would apply to any writer of fantasy, such as Dunsany or Hubbard. When he describes some strange world, he is offering a somewhat garbled version of a real one, having its own set of dimensions quite independent of ours.
Shea sipped his highball in silence. Then he asked,
Why can't we conjure things into and out of this universe?
We can. You successfully conjured yourself out of this one. But it is probable that certain of these parallel universes are easier of access than others. Ours...
Would be one of the hard kind?
Don't interrupt, please. Yes. Now, as to the time dimension, I'm inclined to think we can travel among universes only at right angles to the pencil of space-time vectors, if you follow my use of a somewhat misleading analogy. However, it appears likely that our vectors are curved. A lapse of time along the inner side of the curve would correspond to a greater lapse of time along the outer. You know the theme in certain fairy tales. The hero comes to fairyland, spends 3 days, and returns to find he has been gone 3 minutes or 3 years. The same feature would account for the possibility of landing in someone's imagined idea of the future. This is clearly a case where a mind has been running along one of the outer curved vectors at a speed which has outstripped the passage of time along our own inner side of the curve. The result... Harold, are you following me?
Shea's highball glass had rolled onto the rug with a gentle plunk, and the suspicion of a snore came from his chair. Fatigue had caught up with him at last.
And I think that's a good place to stop.
Well, I think that's the last page that we have, isn't it?
Yes, it's the last one I printed up. So, well, I'll try to get better copies